Okay, so first, just like introduce yourself, your name, and like any relevant personal information.
Okay, and it's recording?
Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Emily Mullen. I'm a teaching assistant in the art and art history department at CU Boulder. So I teach a couple recitations a week for the World Art class and supplement to the main professor's lecture, and I do grading and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Okay. And this interview is for an exercise from the course that I'm taking this semester, so for the purposes of this exercise, you consent to being interviewed and recorded?
I do, yeah.
Alright. Okay, so the first thing is I would like to learn about your experience of gender in the workplace, so can you describe where you work in as much detail as possible?
Sure. So, like I said, I work in the art history department here at CU Boulder. So, I guess I can kind of tell you what I do. So, again, like I have 3 classes on Thursdays that are each 50 minutes long. My first one has like 11 students in it, and then I have another with 19 and another with 25. And there I have, I think there's more women than men in the classes, but I do have good number of men. Sometimes you get mostly women in these art history classes. But what else was I supposed to say? Yeah.
Just learn about your experience of gender. Basically that's it. Like describe where you work.
Yeah. So now this is my first semester doing this as a teaching assistant, so I don't have a whole lot of experience in this particular job. But it was interesting because when we first started, Dr. Cordova is a professor, and he's great. He's wonderful, and he's always told us if there's ever any student issues that he'd always back us up with that. And he said something he's found that some women who are TAs deal with is that sometimes students don't take them as seriously. And so he said that's something we maybe have to look out for. I haven't really had a problem with that, at least as far as I know. But that is something I think, as far as gender in the workplace goes, that is an issue that you can get kind of in a teaching setting. So.
Okay. Second question, like, can you describe a typical day? What activities do you do? I mean, you already kind of said that.
Yeah, that's okay. So, typical day, I have my 3 classes back to back, so I come in and I don't know how much detail you need. I come in and I like set up my computer and get all my paper and attendance sheet out. And so really, that's only some of the work I do. So I mean, again, on a typical teaching day, I'm just handing out papers, and then we're going over readings, and then I kind of facilitate group discussion, and I do that with every class. It's pretty repetitive, but a lot of my work is also done outside of the classroom, either like preparing for lessons or going to meetings with the other teaching assistants, because we have to make sure we're doing everything consistently across the different courses, and I think there's 6 of us, and everyone has 3 courses each. And then I also, of course, attend the lectures taught by the main professor, Dr. Cordova. And so a lot of what I'm doing is either like reading and going over the assignments that we're going to be talking about in class, or a lot of it's grading things. And then now, as we're getting further into the semester, we're getting more into helping students with like figuring out how to do research and writing essays and that sort of thing. So it's it really varies.
That kind of ties into the next one, which is just like, who are your coworkers and what activities do they do, which is
so we all pretty much do the same thing, and that's intentional. We try and coordinate. We meet every week to coordinate and make sure we're all on the same page, so we're not giving students like different classes different directions, or everyone's giving the same homework assignments. So we're trying to keep everything consistent. So we do things pretty the same, but we also have some autonomy as far as, I mean, we do run our own sections, and we make decisions about grading, and sometimes we can change activities up a little bit if we need to. So, but yeah, for the most part, we all kind of do the same thing.
Okay, so then what activities do you think do men do, and what activities do women do?
So it's interesting because all of if I didn't mention it already, all the TAs this semester are women, and I think last semester there was only one gentleman. So it's very woman heavy. If there were, I'm not sure if there was really any difference, just because this job is so standardized across. We're all supposed to do the same thing. So again, maybe the only thing we might run into is maybe the men might be seen as more of an authoritative figure in the classroom, so maybe that would lead to a different dynamic in their classrooms in particular. But like I said, it's all women here, and for the most part, I think everyone's everyone's doing all right and hasn't had too many issues with
Mhm.
that. So. Mhm.
So is there any time that your own gender or the gender of a coworker was an issue?
Not that I can think of. I feel like that's probably happened to some people in the past. Like, for instance, I know there have been TAs in the past who they've had students come into office hours and then possibly maybe get a little inappropriate, and so I am sure that's much more of an issue with women than men. And then of course in any university setting, then you can also have that issue with like professors that you're working with and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't think that anyone's had any issues anytime recently. Certainly not with any of the professors in the department. They're all really great, but I know sometimes that's been an issue in the past, and that's the only thing I can think of. So we have to be kind of aware of that thing. Like when we have students meeting with us in the office, we always have to have the door open. That's a rule. And, that sort of thing. So it's been pretty good this semester so far, I think.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right. Next, do you think certain occupations should be gender specific? Like some maybe.
That's an interesting question. Off the top of my head, my answer is going to come off a little strange probably. I'm trying to think about it. The only thing I can think of is, now certainly with this job, I don't think it matters if you're a man or a woman, but there are jobs, the only thing I can think of is if you're in possibly cultural or social situations where maybe people might be more comfortable with a man or a woman, like, I don't know. Here's an interesting example. I know at the and there was an art museum where they had objects from a culture, and within the culture themselves, the objects would only have been handled by men. So it was like, well, maybe we need a male curator to handle that thing. And that was a museum I heard about who's trying to figure out how to deal with that issue because they didn't want to be biased in their hiring. But then it's like, well, what do we do with this object if only men are supposed to handle it? So I don't know that. I mean, as far as capability-wise, I don't think there's really any jobs that like they should have a man over a woman or anything along those lines. But I think there are certain situations where maybe it might be a little more appropriate depending on what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. All right. This probably you touched on already, but in your current workplace, you think men and women are treated fairly equally?
Yeah, from what I've seen, and again, it's all women here, but
yeah.
I know, like I've
but
heard
maybe
some.
Just at the university.
Yeah, I've heard some female professors talk about, like for example, at the end of the semester, all faculty get evaluated. They get the FCQ form you fill out, and rate it. And women, if they're strict, they tend to be judged as mean compared to men who they kind of get away with it more. And it's not that women should be less strict; it's that people tend to just interpret it as mean or bitchy, basically, if it's a woman, and less so with a man. And I've heard female professors talking about that. So yeah, and or I know in one school setting I was in, it was mostly male professors, and the women in the department, like the students, felt like maybe they weren't being taken as seriously, and they were a little concerned about who they could talk to about that if it was all men in the department. I mean, so you do have some weird issues when there's like a gender imbalance, I think. But,
All right, and then like generally, I mean, kind of outside of the university, do you think gender inequality in workplace is a real issue?
I think it can be. For instance, I worked somewhere in the past, I don't know if I should throw this in or not, but I think it's kind of relevant. So like I worked at Home Depot for a little while, and that's definitely a very, it was mostly men there. Yeah. And I worked in the department, and I would find that I didn't have too much of a problem with my fellow employees, but like male customers there would sometimes make inappropriate remarks, or they didn't want me to help them because I was a girl. They would rather just not have any help at all, and instead of having me help them. So there's definitely still areas where that's lingering. And now in my own experience, I've had a very privileged experience. I haven't run into a whole lot of bias outside of little things like that, but I know that can definitely be a problem in some places.
Yeah. All right. Do you feel as though male members of staff at your workplace progress quicker than females?
And like I said, this is my first semester as a TA, and it's all women now. There's not necessarily a sense of people getting promoted over other people in this position, particularly in TAs. Again, I feel like for women professors in universities in general, that probably is an issue. You probably do have men who are taken more seriously
and then
Just like you gotta
promoted.
get that anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. And then last of all, do you think your gender has any affiliation with the progress of your career in general?
You know, it's possible. You know, and this is kind of funny. Something I didn't quite mention. I also feel like, at least in my experience, sometimes people are nicer to women than they are to men, and I feel like sometimes that has definitely worked in my advantage as far as having an easier time in, like, in the workplace or that sort of thing. I mean, not not to turn the conversation around, but as far as working against me, I think I've been lucky enough where I haven't really had that issue, but I'm sure there's plenty of women who do run into that where their gender works against them in that case.
All right. That's it, pretty much.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Yeah, no problem.
Okay.